Alrighty, guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. Today, I want to talk about a little bit about therapy, and specifically a certain type of therapy that was really helpful to me in the sort of navigating of figuring out difficult, whether it be emotions or kind of conditions or circumstances in your life. So, I obviously talk a lot about diet, and I think that's a key piece of this. But I think in sort of um, unfortunately, sometimes what happens is people either get the diet piece right, they realize that they can really impact how they feel and how they, uh, their levels of happiness, their mood, and all these things. They realize that's a big lever, but then sometimes they don't grasp some of the other pieces of just uh, kind of healing, moving forward, putting your life together, so to speak. And I say that as someone who has definitely not put their life together on all fronts, but I think I do have some insights on this. So I wanted to share that and hopefully give you maybe something that's helpful in terms of framing how you're moving forward with whatever you're dealing with. So yes, diet's a big piece of it, and obviously the carnivore diet, that animal-based piece, is like huge, and it seems to be a very powerful lever to pull in terms of feeling better. It has been for me, it has been for lots of other people, and often that's the first domino to kind of put forward. But as I reflect more on this, as I learn more, and as I try to be as realistic and as stoic, maybe, as I try to like embrace things more, I'm realizing that how holistic you really have to be very holistic when you look at these things, and that means sometimes accepting things that maybe you would be more uncomfortable not accepting. So something I think can happen, especially if you're super hyper focused on a diet, and I did this. Yes, it's powerful. Yes, it's helpful, but sometimes it can make you start to ignore other things in your life. So there's maybe been a bit of that theme in my videos as I've navigated that kind of recently, realizing that it's one thing for something to work to a certain level and to be helpful, but then there's still your whole life. So I mean, I've been inspired by a lot of people who've gone on and started YouTube channels or talked about diet, and they've built their life in some ways around the diet. And though that's inspiring, I've kind of been like, oh, I don't know if that's for me, and if that's not for me, what does it look like to start looking at some of these other pieces of the puzzle, which reminded me of a few years ago when I was sort of getting into the whole like therapy and like learning about the difference between sort of psychoanalytical stuff and like cognitive behavioral stuff. Like what other tools do you have? So with that being said, I want to just jump into this and introduce to you something called ACT, or it stands for Acceptance and Commitment Therapy. And I think it's just such a powerful thing. The therapy is almost like a bit of like maybe that's not even helpful to say this, because I think this is just a really great way to approach a lot of different things in life. At the end of the day, sure, we want to feel good. We want things to kind of run smoothly. We don't like forcing ourselves to do things that we don't like to do. And maybe sometimes cognitive behavioral therapy gets a bit of a rap for that sort of exposure model of, okay, if you're afraid of something, you have to face up with it. And it's like, there's a place for that, but sometimes it's difficult to hear, which is why I think it's awesome if people are having excessive anxiety or depression or something. Use the diet to actually feel better and put yourself in a place where then you actually want to do things that are difficult, even though they're still difficult. So with that being said, acceptance and commitment therapy is gaining a lot of traction, and it's just proved to be almost maybe the most effective kind of type of behavioral intervention for people who are trying to make behavioral change. So it's pretty neat. There's probably different versions of this, but like ACT is the one that really resonated with me, and I just think it's super helpful. So what is it? I mean, yeah, if you're stepping into kind of the world of therapy, you might have like no idea what's going on, and typically there's the behavioral one and the psychoanalytical one. So psychoanalytical one, think like lying on a couch talking about your problems, how you feel, and what happened to you as a kid. Not to belittle it, I think it's actually super helpful, and it's more human in a lot of ways because it's very personalized, and it looks at what you actually felt and all this stuff. And then the cognitive behavioral side is more like, okay, given what's going on, what can we do to actually make things better? Given everything that's going on, not what we wish felt better, not that we wish someone behaved differently or we wish something hadn't happened to us, and not invalidating it. What do we do? What do you do in that situation? And I think this is a super, super helpful way of doing that. And just a little example, like one thing that struck me when I was learning about this was they said something like, someone who's super overweight, it's like, yes, they want to lose the weight. Yes, they're trying to do that. But they asked them the question, what kind of person would you be if you lost the weight? What kind of things would you be doing? And kind of how would you feel? Or what would you do? And the idea is to say that a lot of the times you can actually start becoming that person before you've even lost the weight. Because what sometimes happens, and we had a great podcast with Gormy Goes Keto, who lost a whole bunch of weight. You can check him out on Instagram, and our podcast I'll link the episode up below. Great guy, super inspirational. But people will, if they set a goal and they make it happen, so maybe it's losing the weight, they're still not the person that they think they were going to become by the time it happens, and so they just relapse. So the question is, like, what can you do today, right now? How can you start being the person that would make your life better, that would move you forward, even if you're not where you want to be, even if you still have the anxiety, even if you still have insecurities, even if you're still overweight? What can you do? So what is it? Let's run through the 6. I'm going to run through the 6 kind of core principles of ACT, and we'll just go over them because it's all sort of based off this. And then there's kind of this, and there's one other thing that framework that's just helpful for, like, how can you use this in your life today to get better, even when you're stuck. I think this is a great way to get unstuck, this model. So the 6 core principles of ACT are diffusion, acceptance, contact with the present moment, the observing self, or self as context, values, and then committed action. So maybe when I edit this, I'll try to pop these in. But diffusion, think of the opposite of fusion. When two metals are fused together, it's like that. So fusion is like, for instance, if you're having bad thoughts or intrusive thoughts or self-hatred or things like that, you're fused to your thoughts. So you feel the same as your thoughts. You have a thought and it seems like it's real. And I've talked about that with OCD before. Like, as soon as you have a thought, you think you are the thought. So diffusion is realizing you are not your thoughts. So it's starting to create a space. That's where some of this mindfulness stuff comes in. But that's basically it. Diffusion, you're not your thoughts. You get that space and suddenly you're not the thought that happens. So that is huge on its own, but we'll move on. Acceptance. Acceptance is a tough one because people often think it means accepting bad things, period. And it doesn't mean that, and it's not invalidating when acceptance is done properly. Acceptance means that given everything that's going on, how can you constructively move forward? That's the best way of framing it. Given everything that's going on, yes, it might be bad. Yes, it might be terrible. Yes, you might have been wounded or whatever it is, abused. Given all that, how can you constructively move forward? In the world of anxiety, and I've talked about that book, Hope and Help for Your Nerves by Claire Weeks, which is an awesome book, and I did a little video on that. It's called The Book That Changed My Life. That's what the video is. That's one of her steps as well, because until you accept even that things are going to be shitty for a while, you can't actually move forward. If you're not willing to accept that things are going to be shitty, and you're only willing to accept a reality that is perfect in your eyes, you're always going to be stuck. You'll never move forward. So it's kind of another breakthrough. It's like you can only move forward once you accept where you're at, and that's huge. So don't underestimate that one. And then the next one, number 3, is contact with the present moment. And this is another huge one. Most of the time when you're ruminating or stuck on things or wishing you were somewhere else or thinking you should be somewhere else or imagining your life differently, a lot of that can just be living in your head. I'm probably the king of this because I've done it a lot through my 20s, and it can seem like it's constructive, but it's a trap and it's unconstructive, and it can really lead you away from your life because you're not actually there. You're not present. You're always telling yourself a story about where you'd like to be or how you'd like things to happen or what you think you'd deserve or whatever. And it can pull you out of the present moment, and that's where real life happens, and that's where change happens actually in the present moment too, which is also connected to the sort of mindfulness piece of how you can practice this, how you can make this happen. So contact with the present moment is huge. When you're pulled out of the present moment, that's a problem. Of course it's going to happen. It happens all the time to all of us, but contact with the present moment is where change happens. And I think it was Eckhart Tolle. He's another one of these sort of mindfulness present moment people. And I I'm meaning to read his books, but I haven't yet. But I heard someone say that he said, there's no problems in the present moment, which is a very powerful thing. There's no problems in the present moment, because it's kind of like the acceptance thing. When you realize in the present moment you can act in a certain way, usually it's not solving the problem that you're thinking about, and usually the way to solve the problem is by doing things that are different than you think. Because usually when we're like, oh, solve a problem, we start ruminating about being upset about the problem or what it's going to take to do it. And usually the step that we need to make in the present moment is quite simple. It's like, it's not, it's like if you're in debt, you can't just go right away and make that debt go away. So you start stressing about work or whatever, but it's like, no, all you need to do today is put like $2 towards that debt. That's it. Or you're really overweight. No, all you need to do today is actually go for this walk and this break you have. Go get a 20-minute walk in, right? So anyways, contact with the present moment is what sets you free. It allows you to act and allows you to solve the problem in these little steps. The next one is the observing self, or self as context. And this is really neat because it might at first sound similar to the other ones, but this is realizing that you're not everything that happens. Like, things happen to you and feelings happen in you, and you're part of these different stories, but you get to observe that and see what goes on. Sometimes it's difficult to connect like all the pieces. You might have lots of different things going on in your life. You might have things that have happened to you, and when you try to start connecting to all these things and making yourself these things, like, it's very disintegrating. We feel disintegrated. And so self as context is like this, or the observing of self is like, wow, here I am, and there was that happened, and there was this that happened. We are the landscape of these things that have happened. And maybe that's a nice way to think about it. The landscape, all kinds of different things can happen on the same ground. But we are that ground, we are that garden, and there's different things going on. We're not one thing that happened in it. We're not another thing. We are the context of what's happening in our life. That one's probably the most nuanced one, so I'll just leave it there for now. But it can set us free from a sort of super strong identification with one event that happened. This one becomes important with things like abuse or like trauma. We're not just one thing that happened to us, or we're not one mistake we made. We are a context in a changing landscape of things that are going on in our life. The next one is values. This one's really neat because this is kind of the compass of the whole model. So values are, they are things that we try to adhere to, and to stay on the path, so to speak, or to move forward or to have change, we look to our values to do that. So it might be, it could be simple. There's different kinds of values, but it could be like exercise. It could be like personal responsibility. It could be like being on time, timeliness. It could be loyalty to family. It could be seeking adventure. It could be music. Like, you could get more or less specific, but and in some of the books about this, they teach you how to lay out values that are important to you. It could be so one of mine would be like helping others or inspiring others. Trying to use my own experience to do that. That would be a value that I would have. So if I'm kind of stuck, I could look at it and say, okay, how can I get back on to one of my values here? And so you'd have maybe 6 core values, and you break them down into some other ones so that they set this compass. So when you start to lose your way, or you get caught up in the things, your sort of pitfalls, or you want to do something, returning to your values is the best thing to do. And instead of falling into some of these traps that we think might be moving us forward, returning to our values is how we stay back on track. So there's this cool exercise where it's called, I forget what it's called, but this whole model has all these really neat little exercises to help you identify where you're getting stuck and not get stuck. And so one of them is this exercise where, the therapist says, like, if you had one session with a person or one interaction, it would be to put this rope down, this string or this rope down on the floor of the room, and you lay out your values along that rope. And you could put little labels, like you could write them down or whatever. But you imagine them string out along that rope, and your life is the rope, and you walk along this rope in accordance with your values to stay true to them. And when you fall off, all you need to do is come back to the rope. That's your goal. Your goal is to come back to the rope. So if you're stuck one day, if you're discouraged, how can you come back to that rope in a very small way? Because that's what's actually, that's going to create meaning in your life. Coming back. So the values are core. They're your anchor. They're your compass. And that's how you stay on. Little segue here. There is such a thing as toxic values, which is a very interesting thing. And that links up with a little bit of some of the other videos I've talked about. And that's where some things like guilt, scrupulosity, things like codependency, where you value what others think in a way, or others' feelings in a way that's actually not healthy. So that could get into toxic values where you are adhering to something that's not serving you. That's sort of a different topic though. We're talking about values that are helpful, that are true, that set you free. So the final one is committed action. And this brings it all together. This is sort of if you do all the other stuff without the committed action, it's kind of hard to change. Committed action is where the rubber meets the road, in a very real way. It means that you take actions after defusing, after accepting, after living in the present moment, after observing yourself and identifying your values. You then move. If you don't walk along the rope, if you don't step out, if you don't live, then it's just going to be this sort of in your head thing, which unfortunately is what happens, going back to the beginning, is what sometimes can happen in that psychoanalytical type of therapy. It can be really helpful. You can have breakthroughs. You can have insights. It can be great, but you might never start taking action to change your life. You're like, oh my gosh, now I know why I feel this way. Yeah, that event, when I was spoken to that way, or when that teacher said that, or that trauma, that's why. You're still stuck where you are. Like you might have all the insights in the world, but unless you take committed action to counteract that, to heal from that, it doesn't work. So bringing it back onto this side with the 6 core principles of ACT, this committed action brings it all together. You are scared of speaking in public. You're scared of talking to girls. Go start talking to girls. Like, there's no way around it. You kind of have to do that. And that's something like that I've done, and probably a lot of guys, right? It's like, oh, you're scared? Go do it more, and you'll be less scared of it. And that's kind of the king of, that's kind of that whole concept is the exposure model, right? You're scared of spiders. Go a little bit closer to the spider. Go a little bit closer. I'm just picking things that are kind of common and relatable. Maybe it's going out of your house. That's a huge one. When you're stuck at home. Now I'm forgetting the name of that. But yeah, lots of people have that, way more than you'd think. And I even experienced that sometimes. You're literally anxious to go out of your house, to go out of the door, to go to the grocery store. For some people, it's a battle. So it's like, okay, the committed action, once you get some distance from this, you have your model, you have your values, you're like, okay, one of my values, your values might be freedom. That's a great value. Everyone should have that one. It's not free to be stuck in your house because you're scared to go out. So maybe you're just going to go to the door. Maybe you're going to walk around your house. Maybe you're going to walk to your mailbox. And that might be painful and slow and seem like you're not getting anywhere, but it's the committed action. And when you put it together with these other things, it's where the rubber hits the road. It's where you can start healing. It's where you can start being proud of yourself. You can start moving forward. You can start living from your life where you're really at and not where you want to be, because that is one of the biggest things here. And I've done that, as I mentioned. I've fallen into where I want to be, thinking about that, or either just like reading about it or something, or thinking I'm doing things. And without the committed action, there's not a whole lot that's going to happen. So that's important. Hopefully that's helpful. This is acceptance and commitment therapy. You can just Google it. There's some awesome books and resources all about this. There's some awesome podcasts. I'll try to link them up in this video. So hopefully that was helpful. I know it was like, this was less about diet. It was more about life stuff. But this is huge. It's a big piece of the diet stuff. It's going to help you with your diet. It's going to help you adhere to that. If that's a value for you, if you know that that's something that makes you feel good, it's going to give you a framework for that. But this is kind of on the behavioral side. This was very helpful to me, and it is a really constructive way to move forward when you're stuck or confused or you don't know what to do. So hopefully that is helpful. And thanks so much for watching. This is Real Life Ed. My name is Ben. If you found this helpful, please subscribe. Please like the video. And I'd love to hear your experience with this, if it's helped you or if it's new to you or whatever. So peace out. Talk to you guys soon.